Om Namah Pranavartaya Shuddha Jnanaika Murtaye Nirmalaya Prasantaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Arunagiri Mupetam Satchidananda Murtim Ramana Iti Prativyam Vishrutam Jnana Suryam Gahana Hridaya Vidyam Leelaya Bodhayantam Satatam Aham Ameyam Sadgurum Samsmarami Aham Yanum Moola Avidyai Ahandrida Aham Ahamaha Aldum Pahalara Aham Volir Atmadevan Padattinil Aham Ahirvaha Anisham Ramikave. My humble pranams. A few times I have to clear my throat. So kindly excuse me. Bhagavan has said that those who are not able to follow the self-inquiry path have the option of following self-surrender, Sharanagati. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 9 forms of bhakti are listed out by Narada in the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Navavidha Bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnoho Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. For each one of these forms of bhakti, Srimad Bhagavatam exemplifies somebody or the other. Like Shravanam, Parikshit to start with. He just heard the glory of the Lord. Kirtanam is singing the praise of the Lord. Smaranam, constantly thinking about him. Padasevanam, worshipping the divine feet of the Lord. Archanam, the ritual form of worship. Vandanam, showing reverence all the time. Dasyam, to act as the servant of the Lord, to be in the service of the Lord. Sakyam is to be the companion of the Lord. Atmanivedanam is offering of oneself to the Lord. Atmanivedanam is what Bhagavan calls as Sharanagati, total surrender, he says. So the very name Atmanivedanam tells us that it is an offering of as a naivedyam to the Lord. Atmanivedanam. There can be no better commentary of Atmanivedanam than the Padikam verses. I'll come to that. But the question is, will a jiva be able to offer himself completely and destroy himself? That is total surrender. There should not be any jiva left after the surrender is over. Bhagavan says, if there is a jiva bhavam left, then it is not complete surrender. The jiva who is left behind will be thinking about so many things, asking for so many things. It will not be total surrender at all, he says. So the question is, whether a jiva will be able to do this surrender all by himself totally at one go. In fact, even this applies to self-inquiry also. Can the jiva find its source? Can the mind find its source and become one with it, one with the source, all by himself? That is the question. This was a question that Kapali Shastri asked. Kapali Shastri was a disciple of Kavyakanta, great Sanskrit scholar. In fact, when Kavyakanta translated Ulladu Narpadu into Saddarshanam, he gave a commentary in Sanskrit, Saddarshana Bhashyam. He came to Bhagavan to show his Bhashyam. Bhagavan went through the thing and he asked a lot of questions. And they have also been included in the Saddarshana Bhashyam of Kapali Shastri. One of the questions that Kapali Shastri asked Bhagavan was, can an individual, without taking the help, any external help, by himself can reach the self? He must have had Bhagavan in mind. And he must have thought that Bhagavan would say yes as an answer. Bhagavan said, no, it is not possible. And Bhagavan said, divine grace is essential. Then Kapali Shastri asked, if grace is alone required, then what is the use in making any efforts? Efforts are not required? He asked. Then it seems Bhagavan said, no, efforts are required. And he explained. He said, effort is the part of the deal that the jiva brings to the table. And divine grace is the act that the ultimate plays. These two things are essential. There is no effort without the divine grace, and there can be no divine grace without your own effort. There is no active grace, he says. This is the word that he uses, active grace. There is no active grace for somebody who does not make any effort. So effort is required. And once the effort is made, grace starts flowing. And these two are like, the push-pull forces. From the outside, the jiva is pushing to get inside. And from inside, there is a deep inner movement which is called as the grace, and that divine grace pulls the jiva into itself. And then the final act, the end game, is totally the Supreme Self's. The jiva cannot play any role. The efforts can take you up to only such a level, but beyond that, you are helpless, says Bhagavan. So having said that, what this means is that there is something that has to be done by the Supreme Self in order to finally finish the jiva off. So this concept gives rise to a rich imagery, and this is what we find in Padikam. Every verse in Padikam comes out with a bhava of this particular thing, of the self devouring the jiva, swallowing the jiva, and putting an end to the whole thing. This is what we find in Padikam. I'll just take a sample verse from the Padikam, which we just now chanted. This is one thing that is fantastic. Parthanan pudumai uyir vali kanta paruvadam urudaram idanai orthidum uyirin சேஷ்டையை ஒடுக்கி ஒரு தனது அபிமுகமாக ஈர்த்து அதை தன்போல் அச்சனமாச் செய்து அவ்விண்ணுயிர் பலிகொளும் இஃதென் ஓர் தூய்மின் உயிர்கள் உளமதில் ஒளிர் இவ்வுயிர்கொலி அருணமாயிரியே, he says. Parthanan pudumai. I saw a marvelous thing, something very novel. I saw. This is a magical hill. This is a magnetic hill. And just as a magnet attracts iron, this magnetic hill attracts the jivas. And what does it do after attracting the jivas? Urudaram idanai orthidam. You don't have to, you have to, but think of it once. You karuthinil. If in your chittam, you think of him once, then it starts doing its action, and there is a chain reaction. It keeps on pulling you. Finally, you go and stand before it. Till that time, it will keep on pulling you like a magnet. After you stand before him, it makes you immobile. All the mental activities are totally taken away. You stand before that mesmerized, transfixed. You do not know. You cannot even move out of that place. And it, like a prey, you just stand before it. A cobra preying on a mouse or something. Stand before it. You do not have any idea of moving out of that place. In Nuyir Bali Golong, he uses the word Bali. Bali is a word that is normally used for animal sacrifices to please the goddess or god or whatever it is. Bhagavan uses that word. Bali Golum Tanbol Achalama Chid. It makes it immobile like itself. A Binnuyir Bali Golum. It takes you, swallows you. Then, what can I say about this? It's such a mysterious thing. Then, after saying all this, he says, come here and get liberated. Because In the loss of your Jiva Bhavam, you are going to gain that Shiva Bodham. Jiva Bodham goes, and what remains there is Shiva Bodham. You sacrifice your Alpa Jiva, and you get in return that infinite bliss that is assured for you. Podiyan Mayaki, Yen Bodhatte Parithu, Un Bodhatte Katine Arunachala, he says in Aksharamanamali. In various places in Aksharamanamali, you find references to this, and the same language is also used. In fact, the interesting thing is, the language used by Bhagavan is a language that even Kavyakanta uses, and even Muruganar uses the same thing. So we will see all the three. So he says, Bali Godum, you just completely swallow that Jiva and you give him that Mukti. Orthu, women, get liberated, he says. Orthu is to contemplate on it. Women, liberate yourself. We're God. Oh, ye souls of this world, come here. Get swallowed by him and then reach that infinite happiness that is assured for you. Ulamadil Olir. This Arunachala shines in your heart all the time. You Uyir Koli, he says, the murderer of all the jivas, uses a word, murderer, Uyir Koli. Arunama Giriye, this is in the form of Ninda Stuti, and that is the way it is, that rich imagery is presented here. In Aksharamanamale again, Sindit, Arulpada, Selandibor, Katti, Shirayuttu, Undanai Arunachala, you swallowed me. You spread your web of grace, caught me in that web, imprisoned me in that web, and swallowed me. We Sirayittu Undanai Arunachala, he says, Lakshiyam Vaitu, Arul Astiram Vittu, Yenai Bhakshittai Prananoda Arunachala. You ate me alive. The same language, everywhere he uses. Even in Saddarshanam, even in Ulladu Narpadu, though it is a Jnana Grantham, he uses this particular theme in that. He says in one place in Ulladu Narpadu that all the Upanishads and all the Shastras, they talk about if you see yourself, you are going to see God. Seeing oneself is the same as seeing God. This is what all the Shastras say. But how can anyone see oneself? The self is only one. Who sees what? Are there two eyes? That one eye sees another eye? Not possible. So if this is the case, what is the meaning of seeing God? Is God an object for your vision? Can you make it as an object, bring it into your mind and contain it within your mind? He's the very subject. How can he be objectified? He says. So even seeing God, having vision of God is not correct. Not the correct language to use. He says, Tannaitan Kanal Yevan. How is it that one sees oneself? Tan Ondral. There is only one. So there are no two eyes, one to see the other. Kana Onadel, because it is not possible to see this way, he says, Talaivar Kanal Yevan. How do you see God? And then say that I've had the vision of God. Kanal Yevan. Then finally he gives the clue. Unadal Khan. What it means is you become food unto him. Unadal, unavu, sapad. This is what he says. Sapad unnai charndu, unavayan, shantamai povan Arunachala. I came to feed on you, Arunachala. And then he became your food. Charndu, unavayan, shantamai povan Arunachala. There is no absolute peace. There is immeasurable peace in this act of losing oneself and gaining you. This is what I have got. It seems once Bhagavan was walking with his attendant Krithivasan. Krithivasan asked him this question. Bhagavan, if Shiva appears before you now on his Nandi, what will you ask him? What boon would you ask him? It seems Bhagavan smiled and replied, I will tell him, please don't cheat me like this. This is not your real form. Please don't cheat me like this. What an answer. That level never came down from that level. Don't cheat me like this. This is not your real form. This is what I will tell him. There was a woman, a Polish lady. She converted into Hinduism and she called herself as Uma Devi. And she was a great Shiva Bhakta. She had visions of Shiva. It seems she was doing tapas in the Girivalam path in some Varuda Lingam or some such place, I believe. Throughout the night she would sit there and do tapas. And one day she saw the vision of Nataraja on the hill. And the vision lasted for several hours. She was thrilled. Next day she came to Bhagavan and told Bhagavan what happened to her. He listened to all that. Okay, where is the vision now? It's not there now. It has disappeared. So it means it is not permanent. It is temporary. What is permanent is only consciousness. These visions tell you something, but they are not the end in themselves. Go beyond these visions. There is a talk, one of the longest of talks, an outstanding talk in Talks with Ramana Maharshi, talk number 450, where this conversation takes place. He explains everything to her. He says, this vision, don't be cheated by this vision. Same thing happened to Papaji, Punja. There is a big story behind the whole thing. He comes to Bhagavan, but he is not totally impressed. And then he goes to, he was doing the Krishna Japam constantly. He would have visions of Krishna. He would playing with Krishna. From a childhood, he used to play with Krishna. He went to one of the caves in Arunachalam and there he meditated. And then he had the vision of Krishna. For 3 whole days, he spent with Krishna. He was thrilled about it. He came to Bhagavan, stood before him, and in a very jubilant manner, with a lot of pride, he said, Bhagavan, Krishna played with me for 3 days. Because right from the beginning, he was not very happy with knowing yourself, ask yourself this. Those things did not appeal to him at all. So he stood before him, and with a lot of pride, he told Bhagavan, Bhagavan, I played with Krishna for 3 days. What do you say to this kind of a question? Bhagavan asked him, where is Krishna now? He said, no, he's not there. He disappeared. What is the use of a God who appears and disappears? What is the use of a God? Who can ask such a question except Bhagavan? When this question was asked, Papaji was totally shattered. He did not know how to answer that question. He went back in a huff. He went back to Chennai, where he had taken a job. And he wanted to continue with his japam, Krishna japam. It seems he was not able to remember the mantram at all. The mantram that he was chanting for 2 to 3 decades disappeared from his mind completely. Try however much, he could not remember what that mantram that was taught to him. His mind was a blank. He rushed back to Bhagavan because he knew that something has happened. After that question was asked, something has happened. It seems Bhagavan asked him, oh, you are not able to remember your japam? Okay. How did you come to the ashram? Why is Bhagavan asking this question? It looks very silly. How did you come here? Said, I took a train. And then what happened? I came up to Tiruvannamalai station. Then what did you do? I took a jatka. Then what did you do? I came up to the ashram and discharged the jatka. That is exactly the way it has happened to you in your japam. Japam is a vehicle for you. It has taken you up to this place. After you have come to this place, those things are not of any further use. Like you are discharging a jatka, you're getting down from a train and then letting it go. These things have served their purpose. So these visions, all these things, they are at a lower plane. You cannot make God an object of your vision. Remember that. So seeing Shiva, seeing Krishna actually means being Shiva. Seeing him actually means being him. That's what he says. Here, the actual meaning is Unadal Khan. You become food unto him. Kavyakanta translated this. Most brilliant translation. Very difficult to translate Bhagavan's Tamil poetry into Sanskrit. He has done a very good job. He says, I'll just read out that portion alone. Swayam tad anni bhavanam tadiksha. Tat iksha. Iksha means the vision. Tadiksha, vision of God, tadiksha, is swayam tad anni bhavanam, to become food unto him. Unadal Khan is translated so brilliantly, tad anni bhavanam. Nivedanam, Atma Nivedanam. The actual meaning is you become food unto him, you are consumed by him, you are digested by him, you become part of him. That is the final stage. Kavyakanta, even before he translated, that 40 verses in praise of Bhagavan, one of the verses, that is many years before this translation occurred, he himself had said this. What he said was, in his praise of Bhagavan, a rich imagery again. Narapasu niman ahamitadayan parasibaudanam bitanushe pachan. Pachan, pach is a root word which means to cook. He's referring to Bhagavan as a good cook. And what does he cook? He cooks your mind, he says here. Nara Pashu, he says, all of us are human animals. Nara Pashu Niman. The imagery is Shiva is sitting there, and as a chief priest, Bhagavan is standing next to him. He has a stick with him, and one by one, whoever comes to him, he beats him, and he removes the jiva from the body. Vitanushe, take the tanu, the body out. He takes the mind out of you. He cooks it well, and he gives it as the naivedyam to the Lord. Parasiva odanam. Parasiva odanam. Odanam is the food. Same thing he was saying before that. Parasiva odanam bitanushe pachan. He says in this verse. Muruganar uses the same language. And as far as Muruganar is concerned, one entire chapter is devoted to this. 32 verses. You mentioned about Uyirunni. Uyirunni actually means eater of souls. That is the title, eater of souls. 32 verses on this. We saw that verse. Paranalladu Paradihal. One other verse, very interesting verse. Muruganar asks Bhagavan, Payulum talam yeduvo. Kolai payil vittadu evaro. Which training center did you go to, Bhagavan? Where did you learn this act of killing people? Kolai payil vittadu evaro. Who taught you this skill of killing people? And then he says, Dayayin Surupan Tangum Andanartham Peru Marabal. You have come in the lineage, the hoary lineage of Brahmins. Has anyone heard of a Brahmin becoming a butcher? How did it happen to you? Being born as a Brahmin, you have become a butcher. Andanartham Peru Marabal. Uyalin Ulamudayor, Uyir Uliya Piridu Uhaval, Yalum Guru Paravengadanidam, Windidalame. The mood changes immediately afterwards. He says, we can go to this Guru Paravengadam. Used to refer to Bhagavan as Venkada in all the places. He says, we can all go to this Guru because he is going to completely liberate you by killing you. The next verse is even more interesting. Muruganar, the next verse he says, Undo Bali Yendri Emmai Usavi Kadi Manai Pukku Yentol Irai Ramanan Shir Nagayal Uyir Vangi Undu Odanamaha Tanadu Udaratul Adaika Kandominiam Aravan Kadalai Karudarke. He says, this Ramana barged into our houses. Kadi Manai Pukku. He forced himself into our houses and he asked this question, Undo Bali. Is there anyone here I can eat? Undo Bali is what he is asking. Undo Bali, Yendri Emmai, Usavi, Kadi Manai Pukku, Yentol Irai Ramanan. Yentol Irai is Shiva. Shiva is one of the manifestations. He has 8 shoulders. So that is what is being referred to here. Shiva Ramanan, Yentol Irai Ramanan, Shivaramanan, Siru Nagayal, he just smiled and he asked this question, Undo Bali, Uyir Vangi, Undu, Odanamaha, same word that Kavyakanta used. He uses here, Muruganar uses here, Odanam, Naivedyam. Odanamaha, Tanadu, Udaratul Adaika, he has contained us within his body. Condominium, Aravan, Kadalekirdarke, this is the sweetest thing that can happen to us. Come and then get liberated at his presence, says Muruganar. The very fact that we are all gathered here shows that Bhagavan has come and knocked on our doors. There's no doubt about it. Otherwise, we'll not be thinking about him, talking about him. He's come and knocked on our doors. But if he comes inside and asks, Undo Bali, what is it that we are going to say? There was a devotee who asked Bhagavan, I think she is Maharani of Baroda. It is there in the talks. Maharani of Baroda came once. She was a very ripe soul. And she used to have a lot of conversation with Bhagavan. In one of the conversations, she says, Bhagavan, total surrender is impossible. Total surrender is impossible. Since Bhagavan said, I agree with you. It is his infinite grace for us. I agree with you. You know, when Arjuna told Lord Krishna, Krishna, you are asking me to control my mind. It is impossible for me. He says the same thing. Krishna answers, Samshayam Mahabahu. Doubtless. I totally agree with you. Without any doubt, it is really difficult to control the mind. That is the way the Lord told Arjuna. After having said that you have to control the mind, he is able to understand the difficulties. And he says, Asamshayam Mahabahu. Mano Durnigraham. Chalam. It keeps on oscillating all the time. Durnigraham, it is not possible to control. I know that. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. He finishes that. So here Bhagavan tells, I know it is impossible. And then he says, but partial surrender is possible for everybody. So that is the clue. That is the door that he is opening for us. When he comes and asks, Undo Bali, all of us will talk like Maharani of Baroda only. So he says, partial surrender is possible. And what is partial surrender? He does not give this answer in any one place, but in various places we can gather them. He has not talked about partial surrender. You start with partial surrender, he says. It will take you there. Partial surrender, major aspect of partial surrender in our lives is accepting things as they come. If you can accept your life situation, whatever be it, if you can accept it, that will be the starting point. There's a word in Sanskrit for this acceptance that is known as titiksha. Titiksha is the word, and it is one of the qualifications for somebody who will have to go and then realize his self. It is part of what is known as sadhana chaturtayam. Qualifications are listed out by Adi Shankara and Viveka Chudamani. In Viveka Chudamani, he describes titiksha. This is so very useful for us. He says, Sahanam sarvadukkanam. Sahanam, sahibuttanmai. Sahanam is our forbearance, the ability for us to, bear all these things. The vicissitudes of life. So many things will come, attack us. Sahanam sarvadukkanam. Apratikara purvakam, he says. Apratikara purvakam means don't look for a way out. Don't look for any redressal mechanism. Accept it wholly. Chinta vilaparahitam. Chinta vilaparahitam means don't lament, don't complain. Our life situation, we will find ourselves constantly complaining about this or that. So many things are there to complain about. A grumpy boss, an unhelpful neighbor, bad traffic. There's so many things in life. Shankara says, don't complain. Chinta vilaparahitam. Accept it wholly, fully. Bhagavan says, Ninnishtam yennishtam. Normally we ask Bhagavan, I like this, please give me. But can we reverse this? This is the question. Whatever you give, I will like. Can we have that mentality? That is Ninnishtam yennishtam. Whatever you give, Arunachala, I will like that, says Bhagavan. After he came to Tiruvannamalai on the day, 1st of September, he came to Tiruvannamalai. The rain started in Tiruvannamalai. One whole day, this boy did not have anything to eat at all, and he did not ask anybody for any food. There was no thought of food at all. In that square, in the temple compound, there was a person who was actually the boss of all the beggars in that place. He was watching Bhagavan. And he told one of his assistants, oh, this boy has been sitting there. He has not asked for any food. He has not eaten any food. One whole day he has been sitting like that. Give him something. So that person brought in a rusted tin box stale rice, 2 days old rice, with a small pickle thrown in. Came and gave it to Bhagavan. Bhagavan ate it. Years later, he remembered this and he talked about it in the house. Years later, he said, that was the first bhiksha of Arunachala. The taste of that bhiksha I have not had later on in my life. Who can say this? Ninnishtam yennishtam. You gave me this, and whatever you have given me is a gift to me. I will not ask for more. You will give without being asked. Keladu alikkum. Un kedil puhazhai kedu seyyadarull Arunachala. He says, you don't have to ask him. He knows, and he will give it to you. And like what he gives to you, take it as a gift. Live your life like that. So these are all the things that go into making partial surrender. Start with it a little bit, says Bhagavan. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat, says Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Swalpamapi asya dharmasya. In a different context, of course. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya. Practice it a little bit, Arjuna, he says, almost pleading. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. You start doing it, Arjuna, it will save you from great fear, he says. Trayate mahato bhayat. So like that, Bhagavan here says, start with it. You go along. So hopefully when he comes one day and he asks Undo Bali, we would be in a position to say, yes, here I am. We should pray for that day, that it should come sooner than later. So with this I will end my lecture.